RETScreen Expert Tips and Tricks Performance Analysis, presented by David Elfstrom. This video has two main parts. In the first half, I'll go over two methods for getting interval data into RETScreen: RETScreen Connect and plain old spreadsheet preprocessing. In the second half, we will dive into secrets of the CUSUM. I will struggle with selecting a good regression until I listen to what the CUSUM is telling me. Then, armed with curiosity, I'll use the CUSUM to find the base load of a chiller and see how that compares to the hourly data. I'd like to show you two different methods for bringing hourly electricity interval meter data into RETScreen Expert. Here's some sample data that we would want to bring in, and RETScreen Expert at a minimum would need daily data, so that's what we're going to create from this data set. The first method is to actually create an entirely new portfolio. And to do that, under My Portfolio, we first need to put information into a template that RETScreen provides from RETScreen Connect. To get access to those templates, click on the Help, scroll down, and you'll see two different metering templates, Template Data A and Template B. Template B is the one right here, and it already comes populated with some sample data. What interests me the most here is the start date, end date, and consumption. We're going to clear this sample data out, Control-Shift down arrow, delete, switch back to our data file, select these two, Control-Shift down arrow, Control-C to copy, back into the template, right-click, paste as values, and there it is. One of the missing thing, we want to subtract 1 hour from the end date. There's, as usual, several different ways of doing this. Here's one. We can actually manually subtract 1 hour, and only 1 hour from each of these. Control down arrow, left arrow, Control-Shift up arrow, Control D to fill down. And there's our data that could be imported using RETScreen Connect. But often I don't want to create an entirely new portfolio, or I just really want to look at one particular building and I've got a set of data for it. In that case, I want to create my own daily data from this. Now, this data is hour ending, and if I am going to sum for all the hours in a day, we note that at the end of the day, the date switches over. So at midnight, it's actually on the 2nd of January. But when I'm summing these up, I really want to have all of it, including this last hour of the day for 24 hours. So ideally, I want to sum those numbers. Well, let's subtract an hour from the date. Just as we did before, subtract time, 1 hour, no minutes, no seconds. And notice that the date has changed to the previous day. But I don't really care about the time. In fact, I will get a better match if I can just match on the day. So I'm going to truncate that entire date. Trunc format. We'll just cut off the time portion, which is represented as a decimal, leaving only the days behind. And I definitely am going to change the format here because I can never keep straight the months, days, and the year unless I have it in descending date order. So I'm going to copy that all the way down using the format painter. Heck, I'll do it over for here too. But I still want to see the time. So let's do a custom version We'll start off with the time, the date as before. We'll also do DDD for the day of the week, which is nice to know, hour, and minute for 24-hour time. Using the format painter again, click on the column, and there it's all done. Let's fill this out. Control down arrow, move over, Control Shift up arrow, Control D to fill. So now we have what we need to sum up for each individual day. So let's create our range that we're going to sum over. So we're going to create each day. We'll start with the 1st of January. Control C to copy, paste as values. Oh, we've lost our format again. We can just paste that format as well. So there's the 1st of January. And there's different ways of doing this. Let's add one and Control G to go to cell E367 because it's a year. Control Shift up arrow, Control D to fill down. Let's check Control down arrow. Oh, yeah. Delete that last one. So now we've got a whole year of dates. And we're going to call that end date. One of the terms that RETScreen Expert will pick up on. And instead of kWh, I'm going to use electricity, which RETScreen Expert will also pick up on. Now, here's the magic. I am going to do a conditional sum ifs. The sum range is the kilowatt hours that I want to add up. Control Shift down arrow, F4 to lock the range. Criteria range is going to be the date. Click, Control Shift down arrow, F4 to lock the range, comma, and the actual criteria, which will actually change with each row, and that will be the end date. And there we have it. Just to double check before we copy it down, that should be the same value as adding up these 24 rows for the first day. And it is 17567. So let's finish this off by going to the bottom, fill that down, and there we have it. It's ready. Into RETScreen Expert, we can go immediately to Data, Electricity Consumption, and now we're ready to import the data from the file. Notice that it has already picked up the reserved name of end date, and we'll say do not import for the others. We could also click on none at the top to make all of them not import and then just add in end date and electricity. And that's our data. The next step I would do is create weekly data from this. Daily data tends to be a little too noisy. So most facilities and buildings in general will work on some sort of a weekly cycle. You can begin with a Sunday. That's a decent enough place. However, I usually tend to choose Wednesday because then it groups the weekends together in the same data point. It doesn't make too much difference in most regressions. I'd like to share how I've been using the CUSUM as a special way to just improve the regression equation upon which it's based. Let's give you an example. This particular data set is several years of weekly electricity data, and I'm just going to show you what that looks like. Let's plot electricity, and you can tell I've been playing a lot with the cooling and heating degree days because there's quite a combination. I'll just take the last two here, I got an extra one there. And the reason this is interesting to me is the heating definitely follows a pattern, and then it seems to take over with cooling, and then heating again follows the same sort of pattern. So the electricity in blue here is definitely influenced both by heating and cooling. So if I do a regression equation, let's change that to 12. I think it was a little bit better. And heating degree days is 18. So actually right off from the bat, I'm already trying to overlap the heating and cooling degree days by having cooling start earlier. So I'm intentionally forcing some overlap of the two because I suspect that's what's happening. That's why the graph is so flat, yet still moves with both of them. There's probably some simultaneous heating and cooling here. That's not a great equation. Let's back it up to just, well, let's look at it from the line perspective here. And we see that the baseline is pretty flat, but the actual electricity use is jumping up and down all over it. Let's just look at 1 year. Same sort of thing. If the electricity use is kind of jumping up and down, there seems to be some pattern, but the regression coefficients are really not very good. Let's go ahead and see how the CUSUM looks for that. There's a pretty big drop in this portion of the chart here. On a control chart, yeah, it's showing wild swings down to minus 20% off from that regression equation. That's why it's not such a very good fit. But this is interesting. So I did that regression with heating and cooling degree days. And by definition, it's 0 at the end of its 1 year period. So it starts here, and it's 0 again by the time we get to December of 2013, right there. But there's another flat portion here, and another flat portion here. So this cooling and heating degree day regression probably holds for the better part of the summer. Let's pick this, since this is fairly flat already, let's pick this part here from April 2015 until about November or so. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm just going to change the beginning portion here, 2015, April, and we're going to put it in for weeks. Let's start at 40 weeks. No solution. Oh, we got some solution here. It does seem to be following it a bit, although it starts off not so good and kind of gets weak at the end. So let's see what that looks like on the time series. Yeah, it's kind of following a trend here. And cooling takes over. And then it kind of fades away and the heating takes over. Let's narrow it down a little bit. I'll start a bit later. I guess effectively what we're doing here, well, I could just cut it off right here and just use cooling, but I still think there's some sort of overlap happening. So I'm going to reduce this. Let's make it, I don't know, 35. Oh, now our correlation is much higher. It's 0.86. Well, let's see what the CUSUM looks like now. Whoa, okay. So what we've done is say that there is this regression equation that's holding very well from May until, what can that be? Until January? So there's heating and cooling effectively until January. And then there's a large reduction, constant reduction in energy. And then that regression equation kind of holds again from March until November. So that means that this here would probably be just another regression equation for only heating. I think that's what it's telling us. So just to check, yeah, that's what's happening. Let's go back to the time series graph and plot the same period of time, 2015. So that's right there. That's the chiller starting up in 2016. That's March. The red is heating degree days. It's following nicely with heating degree days. And then all of a sudden, even though the heating degree days start dropping, the electricity consumption suddenly jumps up. And the heating degree days now are still following along with it, but now it's got this extra base load. And even though it's not even very cool, like I've already, remember the cooling degree days are set for 12. I mean, I might be able to get, if I could optimize and try and get a lower cooling degree days, but that won't really matter because once it's below this point, it's off for sure. So I'm going to leave it, I would leave it there. So if I'm doing this as some sort of a measurement and verification, I would want to talk to the building owners and say, or operators and say, do you know that your chiller appears to have been running all the way until January? Does that make sense? And if so, why? And this could very easily point in the CUSUM to, well, what's the energy savings by suddenly turning off your chiller instead of running it all year? It's essentially 300,000 kilowatt hours. In fact, we could probably determine what the base load of the chiller is from that. We would know the number of weeks and we know the total kilowatt hours. You can basically divide by the total number of hours and you would get your average kilowatt load for when this chiller's turned on. So let's try that now. Let's have a look. Let's see. So up here we have the first date as being 2016-01-05. And then the last date is 2016-03-22. So the total number of days, 77. 1848 hours. And it's going from 0 to 271,865. So that's with the chiller being turned off. So basically we're saying when we turn off the chiller, it's the equivalent, oops, I'll just take this kilowatt hours, divide by the number of hours, get 147 kilowatts effectively. And that's just based on a regression equation in a CUSUM. But it also so happens that I happen to have the hourly data. And here's what it looks like for the period just right here when it is just turning on for the summer as opposed to when it's turning off. And so let's repeat the same thing. We can try, well, here's a Saturday at 4 a.m. That's a minimum. And it's pretty consistent. This is the winter part. So it's really not changing. There's no extra heating demand. This is going to be all plug loads and lights and things. So here, Saturday at 4 a.m., 387 kilowatts. And then I guess it looks like it turns on. We could do a calculation between these 2 days, but let's find the next Saturday because it seems to kind of go on and then it settles down into this period here. So let's try this. That's Friday. Saturday at 4 a.m., 531.6. So the difference between those, 144 kilowatts. Just for fun, let's try this one here. This point here is, come on, 401.1. 545.4. So the difference between those two, well, it's almost the same, even though they're shifted over a little bit. Wow, that's very close. So yeah, when a chiller's turned on, it's basically 144 kilowatts, and then it's just on, no matter what. And the heating still follows with the heating degree days, and then now it's also following with cooling degree days. So there's definitely some simultaneous heating and cooling, which makes me think that there's definitely opportunities for improvement in this building, whatever they may be. And that's a good example of how we can, even without using the hourly data, we got really close just by using weekly data and looking at the CUSUM and having a good regression fit.